promise. Thank you for having me. It's very exciting for me to be here with all of you. And as she said, this session will be in English. So if anybody needs a translator, the headphones, please go outside to get it. And I am going to be the only of the three speakers here in person. The other two are joining me from Arizona because they had some reasons they could not travel here. So lucky for me, I'm here, but maybe unlucky for you that I'm the only one here. But this panel is going to focus on no-till farming in semi-arid areas. And what I'm going to do to start out is provide an overview of water and agriculture in Arizona. And I'm going to be very quick and very abbreviated in my comments, but please know that if you're interested in the topic of water management, Arizona, what's happening with mega drought and water availability for agriculture, both surface water and groundwater, you'll have the opportunity to hear me tomorrow at 10 o'clock, where I'll be giving a much longer talk about what I'm going to cover here. So the panel will be me giving the introduction, and then of Arizona, Debanker Sanyal, who is an assistant professor of soil health in the Department of Environmental Science at the University of Arizona. So just a little introduction for me is that I'm a professor of environmental science at the University of Arizona. I'm actually an economist by training, so I have to admit to any of you who are there who are farmers is I'm not a farmer. And I can't even boast that I grew up in a farming family. I grew up in the East Coast of New Jersey, of the United States in New Jersey. But for the last 30 plus years, I've gotten very involved with water management and the use of water by the different water using sectors. And farming in Arizona kind of mirrors the global numbers of 70% or more. The estimate is 72% of the water used in Arizona is for farming. But just to kind of give you a sense of place, so Arizona's in the southwestern United States. We're a landlocked state located within the Colorado River Basin. And the Colorado River was even mentioned this morning in one of the opening sessions, because it's well known for the stresses on that water system and that it's used to support 40 million people in different ways. There are 7 states in the United States, 2 states in Mexico, 30 indigenous nations that all make up the Colorado River Basin. In the United States, 2 of the 5 largest cities in the United States rely on water from the Colorado River. And so you've got a lot of economic activity, farming being one of those, that are dependent upon the Colorado River. Arizona also borders the country of Mexico, so we're a border state with Mexico and share water with them, particularly groundwater. I mentioned mega drought. How many of you, this is show of hands, have been to Hoover Dam, which is outside of Las Vegas? Have any of you been there? No. Oh, yes, there's a hand that went up over there and another one here. Because it's one of the iconic man-made wonders of the world, Hoover Dam. It was built in the 1930s. And behind it is Lake Mead, which, if it were full, has the actually first largest storage capacity for a surface reservoir in the United States. But it is at much lower capacity right now, as shown on the picture to your right, where you see all that brown land. If it were full, much of that would be blue. It's about at 32% of capacity right now. because for 25 years now, we've experienced in most years much lower than average runoff from the headwaters, which are north of where this is pictured. And just to show you, there's a table there to show some of what we're experiencing as a result of warming temperatures and changing patterns of temperatures, in that we can have a year with average snowpack, but the runoff can be well below average. And so we've had an over-allocated river to begin with. We have lower flows in it, and we're really suffering from these lower flows in the area. Just a little bit about Arizona water supply and demand. The chart on your left shows the sources, the Colorado River, which forms the western boundary of the state of Arizona, and then is also transported through a constructed canal project into central Arizona, serves a bit more than a third of the water source. Groundwater still provides a large portion. We have some other river systems and some recycled water. And then if you look at the uses, as mentioned, agriculture is responsible for extraction and diversion of about 72%. Then the other point I want to leave you with before I introduce the other speakers, and that is that the water situations differ quite a bit. They vary quite a bit across the state. And tomorrow I'll talk a little bit more about these selected agricultural zones I've circled here. But if you look at the state and you look at the blue on the left, on the western part of the state, that's where there's a lot of surface water from the river and a lot of reliance, 75% or more, on surface water. If you see that greenish color, that's where there's more reliance on groundwater. Some places totally reliant on groundwater, and that's mostly fossil or non-renewable groundwater. And then the gray areas with little pie charts have a little bit, more even reliance on those sources. And we have areas that are highly reliant on surface water, such as the two circled on the western side of the state, the central part of the state, that's become highly, highly urbanized, which historically depended on groundwater and now still relies on groundwater and some surface water, and then the eastern, southeastern part of the state. I'll talk more about that and give a lot more information tomorrow. But what I'd like to do now is turn over the microphone to Mr. Ron Rayner, who will be followed by Dipankar Sanyal. And as I mentioned, and give me just a minute to get my little bit more detailed bio up here. Mr. Rayner, as I'd mentioned, is a fourth-generation Arizona farmer and a partner in A. Tumbling T Ranches with his brother, two nephews, and son. Their family operation is in the west part of the Phoenix Valley and in areas outside of the Phoenix area. The Rayners have developed and adopted a unique conservation tillage system on their entire Arizona farm that, as he'll talk about, uses rotational crops and no-till planter. And they also own farmland in California where they grow wine grapes. And one of the things I want to mention for Mr. Rayner's talk is that, and if you want to, if those in the back want to bring up his slides, and he'll tell me when to advance them, but if you could bring up Mr. Rayner's presentation. Because I want to mention something about the title. So the title of Mr. Rayner's presentation is Trial and Error, Conservation Tillage, Agriculture in Arizona. And if you heard Marcelo Torres speak this morning, he talked about trial and error being a way of learning. And we had no idea, Mr. Rayner had no idea he'd say that in this morning's presentation. So Ron, I'm turning over the microphone to you, and just tell me when you want to advance the slides.
You could put up the first slide, please.
I have the slide that says since 1913. Is that good?
I thought I would be able to see them on my the reception, but they're not showing up.
Right. So you want me on the title slide or the one that says A Tumbling Tea Ranchers? Which one?
The A Tumbling Tea Ranchers.
Okay, I'm there.
Photos of our family farming operation actually started in Arizona in 1913. And a couple of photos of our early equipment when they were digging potatoes along the banks of the Agua Fria River in western Arizona. Shows some of our family being honored for our as a century farm, more than 100-year history. So if we could go to the second slide.
Go ahead, Ron.
Dr. Megdal, this map shows how the state is arranged basically by elevation. Our farms are located in the southwestern part of Arizona, and we're southwest of our Phoenix, our capital city. And our capital city is a metropolitan area of something over 4 million people. So it's actually very urbanized. There are not many of us that are farming out in the desert areas, mainly because there's no rainfall. You absolutely must irrigate every acre that's farmed. Most of our water is groundwater. This photo should be a photo of our farmstead, our headquarters area, and it shows an electric pump discharging about 3,000 gallons per minute. If I calculated it correctly, that would be about 11.4 cubic meters per minute. And that well, kind of amazing, but it has served this farm for right at 80 years, that same well. And the groundwater level change has been very little. It's gone down some and it's come up some. So that's a little different than most people think about groundwater, that it's only a fossil resource and only declines, but obviously it does recharge. The negative part of our water is that it has high salinity, about 2,800 parts per million. That's total dissolved solids. Well, we can only produce crops that have salinity tolerance, like the crops alfalfa, wheat, cotton, and sorghum. And the slide also shows another well that's on the farm that has a very similar discharge rate. Then also in the corner is a photograph of some cotton that has emerged through the residue of wheat after a wheat harvest. You can see the plant coming through the. Next slide, please. Could be the slide that says something about 1996, is that correct?
Yes, Ron.
Okay. That's when we started to experiment with no-till planting of cotton into the residue after the harvest of our wheat. It was common in the past for us to plant grain sorghum behind wheat as a double crop. But usually we tilled the soil. We had 3 to 5 tractor operations that were necessary to do that planting. Required several days of work. Planting no-till, we believe that we could shorten the time to plant and make it possible to grow cotton planted as late as June 1st each year. Most cotton grown as a full season crop is planted in April. Also in 1996, we were very fortunate to have the very first cotton seed that was equipped with the Roundup Ready gene so that we could control any weed growth with an over-the-top herbicide spray. So that, of course, eliminated our mechanical cultivation. In the center of that one field, it shows the cotton on each side of a strip. If you'll look at that strip, that's actually a border, we call it, or a berm that's seen between rows of cotton. So that berm is an elevated area to control the water. The next slide. Our irrigation system utilizes a border flood system. And most of those borders, it's either 100 feet or 60 feet between the GPS leveled berms. There are no furrows in the soil. The crops are planted on the flat surface between the borders. We maintain that with minimal disturbance so that our complete crop rotation is followed inside that border system. Approximately 1/2 of our farm is usually planted to alfalfa, which we grow as a 3 to 4 year continuous crop. The other 1/2 of the entire farm in the wintertime is planted to durum wheat. Then 2/3 of that wheat land, after it's been harvested, is planted with the no-till planter right into the wheat stubble. We plant it into cotton, usually in the last half of May. And we actually reserve about 1/3 of that area, plant to forage sorghum because it is harvested earlier than cotton. And that's where we plant new alfalfa each year so that we can maintain our rotation that requires roughly half of the entire farm in alfalfa. So we take out about 1/3 of it each year and we replant about 1/3 in each year. So that way we maintain full acreage of alfalfa. The next slide, please. This slide shows alfalfa being harvested. And fields are either clothed into windrows for green chopping. There's a photo of the copper going through the field, or we may make bales of hay from the fields when the weather is hot in the summertime. We harvest our alfalfa roughly 10 times per year, so we get 10 cuttings. Next slide. Small part to the left on the slide shows young wheat that's growing after the harvesting of cotton. You can look closely in between the young wheat, you'll see some white patches. Those are just waste cotton that was missed in the harvesting. But you can see that it's still close to the surface. So most of the residue from the cotton crop is not really hidden before we plant the wheat. So just again, to be clear, our rotation for each acre of the farm is 3 years in alfalfa. Then we minimum till the land that's coming out and plant wheat in December. We harvest the wheat in May. Then we plant cotton immediately using the no-till. Cotton is harvested in November. The land is again planted to wheat. This cycle is repeated for 2 years. Then after a third wheat crop, forage sorghum is harvested from the field, and then new alfalfa is planted in that area all planting season. In the right photo, pretty obvious, that's just a wheat combine harvester in the field. The Durham wheat is a unique wheat. It was a specialized market. It's only used for making semolina and not flour, so that the semolina goes to a pasta plant. So they make spaghetti and lasagna noodles, all sorts of good things. We usually achieve about 6,000 pounds per acre in use. Areas didn't do the conversions for hectares. Slide.
Did you say next slide, Ron?
Yes.
Okay, we're on the cotton follows wheat slide.
So just virtually all the smaller photos are cotton in several stages of growth. G. Some a
You want
little
me to
larger.
go? I'm on the crop transition slide now.
Sharon, I mean, I think he wants back, but he was asking what he.
The ones with just, I think there are 3 or 4 small photographs of the cotton in stages of growth.
Yeah,
They were all planted in no-till double crop. Okay, then you can go to the next slide.
okay, crop transition slide, I'm there. Seem to have a little trouble with the audio.
Hear me? No, it's the one-pass vertical tillage tool that we call a finishing ripper. The lower right photo shows a cotton field with quite a lot of the residue that is left on the surface. It's ready for the wheat planter to come in to plant that field. We do want to mention that we can't very well do no-till drilling of the wheat in those fields, because in Arizona, we are obliged to loosen the roots of the cotton from the soil as a preventative measure for insects and diseases that can carry over from one year to the next in those plants if they regrow. Quite often the plants can regrow in Arizona after the winter. That's not a desirable thing, because it does concern us. The next slide. This slide should be a photo that shows a border being irrigated. The water supply is coming from a concrete lined ditch that's part of our on-farm distribution system. And the water is being siphoned from the ditch. A series of 3-inch plastic tubes that are moved by hand. So when one border is finished, our irrigator would move the tubes to the next border. One of the things I want to indicate is that our water use for the 2 crops in one year, the wheat and cotton, it actually uses no more than the water for most full season cotton. There should be a graph beside that photo. Can you see the graph?
Yes, it's up here.
Okay. The graph was prepared by Dr. Paul Brown with the University of Arizona Extension Service a few years ago. and it compares the consumptive use of conventionally grown full season cotton with the bottom part of the graph that shows the wheat double crop with the shorter season cotton. You can see how the peak, the water use in the wheat is in the late spring, then it goes down to nothing. Then we plant the cotton and it uses very little water initially. And when it reaches its full consumption, it's actually past the high ET portion of the summertime. And so our highest water use occurs after that peak. And on average, we do lose some yield compared to full season. We lose about a half of a bale cotton per acre, but we gain a full crop of durum wheat for very little additional water. Plus, we have very little machinery operations that occur in our fields until the harvest time. The next slide, please. We'd like to show that our farm does have some compatibility with some of our natural ecosystems. The birds that are there on the ditch bank are a migratory ibis that visit our fields, especially the wet ones, in the wintertime. Photo shows that should be distinguishable. That's the delivery tube from the pivot irrigation system. We have installed 2 of those on our farm in recent years, and we do that on areas that have less salinity in the leaves on plants in high temperature areas if you have too much salt. So we use the pivot systems on less areas with less salty water. And I will mention that handling no-till crops under the pivot is much desired. It's easier to handle the residue from the crops in that type of system. And we have also installed 250 acres in subsurface drip irrigation. Subsurface drip is buried at a 12-inch depth. When the drip lines are spaced on 30-inch spacing, so it's quite dense. When we have successfully grown wheat and followed it with limited till cotton as a double crop. One of the items in the slide, the lower left, I think you can see the longer distance photo of our farm headquarters with rain tanks in the look further off to the left, the headquarters. That shows the latest threat to farming in Arizona, and that is urbanization. Note just past the farm headquarters, those are giant new warehouse buildings that are in the background. So that's
Ron,
so is the certificate. Yes.
Okay, go ahead. We lost your sound for a second, and Ron, you're going to wrap up because we want to make sure Debunker has time.
Wanted to mention that the lower right is that certificate we earned as a soil health champion. That was in 2018 by the National Association of Conservation Districts in the United States. That's all of my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And there's the email if anybody's interested in contacting Mr. Rayner, the farming operation, attranch@gmail.com. And thank you, Ron. And while the next presentation is being brought up, I'd note that this is a conference about no-till agriculture, regenerative soil practices, and so forth. Mr. Rayner's farming operation is, I think, Ron, you would say unique in Arizona. What he does is not commonly done, so he's really at the forefront of these activities there and a real leader. And as he said, learning through trial and error, but very successful. So with that, thank you, Ron. We really appreciate it. And I want to just give a little bit more of an introduction to Dr. Sanyal, whose presentation slides should be coming up momentarily. Dr. Sanyal Debanker Sanyal, this is actually in the other order, got his master's degree and undergraduate degrees in India, and then came over to North Dakota State University in the United States for his PhD. He joined the University of Arizona in 2022 as a soil health specialist and currently leads a statewide soil health research and extension program seeking sustainable ways to improve soil health and agricultural production in arid and semi-arid environments. And he's focused on finding practical applied solutions for commercial growers and ranchers and making an impact in the real world. And he's very passionate about his work, and I think that will come through his comments. So Debanker, I'm going to turn over the microphone to you, and your introductory slide is up, and you can tell me when you want me to advance it.
Thank you, Sharon. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
I'm sorry, my voice is a little broken, but I will try my best. Thank you, Sharon, for the beautiful introduction. And Sharon, you can go to the next slide because I'll start talking about my topic. So today, I will be talking about how Arizona does no-till or conservation till or regenerative soil health improvement practices. And it is not like other parts of the country in United States or other parts of the world. It is little unique, and we'll talk about the unique environment and the situations first, and then we'll go into the principles of soil health and how we incorporate them in our systems. So as we get abundant sunshine over the year, we can grow multiple crops, and we are irrigated mostly. More than 90% lands probably irrigated in Arizona. Because of that, we can utilize water whenever we want, and any crop we want to grow, we can actually, if we have the water available for that crop, because we have sunshine available. So you can see we have a diverse range of crops. Ron talked about cotton, wheat, durum wheat especially, and alfalfa, are more forage crops, sorghum grains. But we also have crops like vegetables and leafy greens, like cauliflower or lettuce, spinach, kale, broccoli, all these crops that we grow during the winter. So we do have a diversified, or we can have a diversified cropping system because of our unique environment. And we do have a very young, fertile, mineral-rich soil that can support crop productivity and higher production. Next slide, please. Now, the challenges are, now we do get too much sunshine sometimes, especially in the summer. Today it's almost 114 degrees Fahrenheit, around 40, 42, 43 degrees centigrades. So it's hot, and we don't have water enough to keep the soils moist. So what happens, water evaporates and it brings salts from the soil profile and deposits them in the upper profile. So we have a salinity problem. We are salt affected. The middle slide shows caliche, which is a typical calcium-based crystal, which is insoluble and creates compaction, unhealthy soil. And the other part of it is the water situation. And Sharon talked about it. Sharon will also talk more about this. long story short, we are under mega drought and we are not getting enough precipitation to fill our reservoirs, and we are utilizing enough water to irrigate our croplands because we cannot grow anything without irrigation water. It can come from Colorado River or groundwater. The challenge with groundwater is it is also very saline. Like Ron mentioned, 2,800, 3,000 ppm of total dissolved solid. So that's the challenge. So we generally like mix with some good water with poor quality water. But with the situation when reservoir is going down, we are facing challenge how many crops we can grow over the year. Next slide, please. So next slide. I think we have to do it's animation. So yes. So the soil health principles, what we try to follow here, yeah, are like this 6 of them, and it is given by or recommended by many different organizations, including United States Department of Agriculture's wing, which is Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. They recommended these 6 big or main soil health principles that we need to follow to improve our land. One is protecting your soils with some kind of cover. It can be a cover crop, can be some residues. Maintain living roots. So if you have a cover crop or you have multiple crops growing in the soil, the living root will feed the soil when it collect and harvest sunshine, produce carbohydrate and sugars, and feed the microbes and the biology in the soil, keep it healthy. That also boosts biology. So this is one way. Then that there are other ways to boost biology, like you add organic amendments, biological amendments, or other kind of amendments to improve soil environment so the beneficial soil microbes can thrive in the soil. Then another part is integrating livestock, and which is not very common in Arizona, but we are trying to do some work on this ground. The idea is when you have hoofed animals like cattle or goats, what they do, they excrete, and those excreta and their hoof activate the soil structure. It makes it better. It brings back the life in the soil, and it also improves the fertility of the soil because most of those excreta are very enriched with nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. The other part, which is the main part in this conference, is the no-till, the soil disturbance part of it. We always try to approach in a way that we minimize the disturbance, and many a time it is not the no-till that we can do, and we'll talk about that in the future slides, but somehow we want to minimize the disturbance of the soil. If that means you do a shallow tillage instead of a deep tillage, if it means you do 1 tillage instead of 2 tillage, whatever it is, we always want to try to minimize the soil disturbance. And the other part is crop diversification. And same piece of land, we have to grow multiple crops, and we have the opportunity because we can grow crop over the year. So all these soil health principles we are trying to include in our practices, and I'm trying to looking into how they improve soil health. So next slide, please. Now the challenge for no tillage, and Ron mentioned some of them, but I will point out some other things. First of all, we grow some crops like vegetables. They have very small seeds, and they require very fine seed bed so that the crop can germinate properly. So to do that, you need to do a tillage. You cannot really put those small seeds in a residue, like on top of the residue. It won't grow, it won't germinate. So for that, tillage is necessary. Then we are very much reliant on surface irrigation methods like flood or furrow irrigation method. Why? It is not a choice. It is an amendment. Why? We have a lot of salts. When we have surface irrigation, that water pushes the salts down in the profile so that we can have a root zone that has less salt for the time being. That's why our surface irrigation, flood irrigation, furrow irrigation is so important. We know that drip irrigation can save water, but then we may have more salt problems. So we have to do some kind of hybrids. So that's one reason we have to till the land so that we have uniform distribution of surface water. If we have too much residue, then the water cannot move properly and there will be uneven distribution of water. So that's why tillage is necessary in some cases. And oftentimes we are so dry, we cannot irrigate enough, we don't have enough irrigation budget, and we have soils with a strong surface crust. And to break that surface crust, to make sure that the crop germinates, we need to do tillage. Next slide, please. Weed management is a big issue, especially for organic systems. In Arizona, there are a lot of organic farms, and there are more organic farms coming up just because it is more profitable in some cases for some crops. And also, some vegetables, especially the fresh, leafy vegetables, there is a consumer demand of organic produce. So our growers grow organic crops. To maintain those crops, we need to keep those fields clear of weeds. And for many of these crops, you cannot really add a herbicide because there might not be any licensed herbicide or available. Or you cannot probably go inside the field or spray herbicide because we'll be eating those vegetables raw. So that's when we need to do some kind of tillage, in-season tillage, to kill those weeds. Otherwise, those weeds will take all the resources from the crop. So for weed management is a big issue where we need to do some kind of tillage. Next slide, please. No tillage is not a big thing in Arizona. Like Sharon mentioned, Ron has a very, very unique system. We have some other no tillage, but the challenge is many of our farmers, they do not have access to specific equipment. Ron showed some of them. Here are some photos. We need this equipment to do no-till effectively or cost effectively, or we need to have these instruments so that we can grow a crop that is sellable. Otherwise, we cannot get through those residues. But many farmers do not have those. So that is another challenge. And these instruments, they cost a lot. Some of them are more than $500,000. So it is tricky to suddenly change into no-till. Next slide, please. And we are pretty much driven by a forage-based industry because we still have a lot of dairies, and we also supply feed to dairies in California and other states. Our forage industry is very strong, and to do that, our farmers have to grow forage crops. And the problem is the sellable part of the forage crop is the biomass. So you cannot really keep enough residue in the ground. So they want to sell everything to maximize their profitability so that they can make sure they can pay for the rent of the land, because a lot of farmers do rent and lease their lands. So to make sure they make more profit to grow the crop next year, they have to sell everything. And for that reason, sometimes we don't have any residues left over in the ground. So there is no residue incorporation, no carbon going back. So no tillage is often not a choice for growers growing forage crops. Next slide, please. And then, again, not only organic farms, but we have a lot of dairies, like I said. So a byproduct of those dairies are manure and compost. And we like to keep our soils carbon rich because we lose a lot of carbon due to sunshine. So when we add these organic amendments, or sometimes we have very high pH, many of our soils are above 8.2 pH, very alkaline. So to make sure those soils can grow crop, we have to add like gypsum or some other kind, or sulfur kind of amendments. And to incorporate those, you need some kind of tillage. Although they are sometimes shallow tillage, but we still need a tillage. So we cannot really do a no tillage scenario in many cases. Next slide, please. So for that reason, we lean into more conservation tillage. So we're going to do not traditional, conventional deep tillage all the time, but try to minimize our tillage practices. Like Ron said, Ron mentioned, I just link back that choose a crop that would require less tillage or something like that, or choose a crop that can make you avoid or skip 1 or 2 tillage operation, things like that. So we started looking into cotton, which is one of the prominent crops here. We grow probably 60 to 70% seeds that are sold around the United States for cotton. So cotton is an important crop for us. So we started looking into how we can grow cover crops and have some residue on beds, because although there are people who grow cover crops on flat beds, most of the cotton growers, they use a raised bed. So, but there is not enough technology to grow cover crops and keep the residue on the raised bed and make the timeline work. Like that should not take too much time to like have a cover crop and then go to cotton. So we started looking into that. That is one of our projects that is ongoing right now. We are looking to like yield and quality of the cotton seeds. Next slide, please. Then we can choose perennial crops. Like most of our growers use alfalfa as a perennial crop, 3 to 4 years duration, sometimes 5 years. That's the time when you do not till a lot, and that's when you can save soil health or restore soil health. There are a lot of growers now started growing pecans or wine grapes, so that those systems are like perennial systems, and you can have no-till systems there. You can grow, like you can see in the photos. I don't know if it looks good or not, but Sharon and I were working on some projects to identify how we can grow cover crops in different systems and improve soil health and water conservation and soil structure. And this is another way you can have a cover crop that would control the weeds, and you won't need as much tillage. So you can do conservation tillage. So this is another way to do that. Sharon, next slide, please. Then again, to facilitate no tillage or conservation tillage or keep residue or grow on top of residues, you cannot have really flood irrigation system, which is very prominent here. So we have to switch into like central pivots or drip irrigation system where you can work with these residues. So definitely this is a big cost, but we recently had a big program where we invested enough money. I don't want to disclose the total amount onto growers projects where they improved or they introduced new irrigation technologies like central pivots, sprinklers, or drip irrigation. So we are switching more and more into these systems, and so that we can facilitate more conservation tillage and no tillage practices. Next slide, please. And that's it. I think I stayed within the time limit, and if you have any question, I would love to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dipankar and Ron. Before I give some closing comments, please join me in a round of applause for our speakers. And Dipankar, I don't see on your last slide. Oh, there you are. Now we're finally seeing you there because we couldn't see your faces. And I wanted to note that I am definitely in the luckier place because, as he said, I checked our predicted high in Tucson, Arizona, where I live, was over 43 Celsius today. Here it's winter, and it's beautiful winter, and it's gorgeous here. So I'm the lucky one. Sorry, Ron and Dipankar, you're in the heat. But I will talk a little bit more tomorrow. I'll have some numbers about the investments, Dipankar, in the ag efficiency program and so forth. But I think from the pictures there, you could see some of the landscape. And I'll have some more photos tomorrow. But it gives you an idea. It's hot and dry. As our Department of Agriculture, State Department of Agriculture director likes to say, we produce not in spite of the desert conditions, but because of the conditions. Because as pointed out, the year-round nature of the growing season for the alfalfa, Ron, you said 10 cuts. That's more cuts than I've heard as a rule for alfalfa. So that's a lot of cuts. And he's nodding his head. And I'll talk a little bit more tomorrow about the high-value vegetables. But when you have a situation, and in fact, out in the Yuma area, which they didn't talk about, they get very little rain. And again, I'm very bad with conversions on the spots, but they get 3 to 4 inches of rain a year. The rain actually messes up the irrigation practices. You know, they like to have, you know, they're very set irrigation using the surface water in that area. And sometimes it's too much rain all at once. Those 4 inches could come in 2 different rainfalls. So anyway, this is a long history with Ron Rayner reflected here and his multi-generational family, and Debonker, a newcomer who's really inserted himself in a very active and welcome way in our agricultural community in the state. So I want to thank you all for being with us today, and I hope I get to see some of you through the remaining conference. So thank you, Ron and Debonker, and Ron's helper over there. Bye. So thank you all very much.